Hello, everybody. My name is Steve. Thank you for joining me today for this edition of our Friday Fundamentals. Today I'll be taking a closer look at SoftPlan's SoftList module. SoftList is the module that allows you to create highly detailed material reports that are created based on the floor plans you draw. And today I hope to give you a basic understanding of some of the simpler changes that can be made on how materials are estimated with your projects. So what I'm going to do here today is to start with a new project, just to give us an example to run off of. You'll notice that when you create a new project, you have the option of automatically opening a 3D tab and a SoftList tab. I'm going to keep those active today so we can see them. And that new project is created for me with those two extra tabs, a 3D texture tab, and what we'll be concentrating on today is our material report, or the SoftList tab, here labeled currently as standard complete. From the draw menu, I'm going to pick up and draw a wall. We'll start off with a 2x4 and siding wall. And I'm going to create just a simple detached garage. It'll be roughly 20 by, let's say, 24 feet. Like everything in SoftPlan, it's a sketch edit. So once I've sketched my walls, I'll firm up the dimensions by editing them. That's the wrong number. So we put in 20 feet left to right. And as I said, 24 up and down. Redimensioned so they are nice and neat. And I'll bring forward now the SoftList tab. As you can see, it's already producing a list of materials. Taking maybe a closer look at the wall framing, we've got wall plate, 2x4 pre-cut studs. They're currently at the B size, the second size that the program ships with. It's 92 and 5/8, so the walls are currently 8 feet in height. Well, this being a detached garage, I'm probably going to want to make the walls a little bit taller. So I'm going to come back to the floor plan drawing. From the edit menu, go to wall height. It's a quick way to increase the height of all the walls in the drawing. Box in all the walls you want to apply the change to. That's going to be 9 feet. Hit OK. Back into the SoftList tab. We now have the third pre-cut stud size, appropriate for a 9-foot. So it's 104 and 5/8. When you first create a project and a report is generated, that report is based off of the default report selected. And that default can be changed by clicking on our File button, System Options, SoftList Report Configuration, and the default configuration and layout is selected here. So if you prefer to have a different report generated automatically, you select the appropriate report configuration you want to show at that location. If you needed to generate another report different from what is currently shown, or if you opted not to generate it immediately when you create the project, you can go to the navigation here on the left side. And for example, I can select standard detail, double click, alternatively, I can right click and say open. You can also generate a report by clicking on the model menu at the top, material list, and then picking the report that you wish to generate there as well. There's a number of ways you can create or open a material report tab. So this report is the same. It's based off of the same configuration, the standard, although it's displaying in a summary layout. So just to compare the two, if I quickly bring back to the complete layout, the complete, as you can see here, gives a little bit more detail. There are unit costs, a markup percentage is shown, labor costs are separate, cost per unit, etc. So there's a little bit more detail than what is shown in the standard summary. It's going to give us the same information or the same quantities of materials, but the details of those materials is not as laid out with the summary as we see here. I'm going to concentrate on the summary report as opposed to the complete. So I'm going to close the complete report, right click and close on its tab. And what I also want to do is be able to see that report next to the floor plan. To do that, I can right click on any tab, in this case the standard summary, and we have the option to split the screen. Here I want to have a vertical tab group. So upon doing so, I get the report here on my right side. On the left, the remaining tabs, the 3D and the main floor are shown. So there's the 3D, just change my perspective there so we can see it close up. And then the report remains active on the right side. Within that report, we'll take a close look at some of the other things that are currently listing. Towards the top, building permit, engineering fees. Towards the bottom, we have a building cleanup and a walkthrough inspection. These are things that can be enabled or disabled on the fly. To do so, back in the ribbon menu, click back onto the report tab, and there's an option here for edit prompt variables. It brings up this dialog. We can turn on and off certain things that we may or may not want to include. By default, that termite protection is there, but it's set to include no. Building permit is, and it also has a cost value. So we can enter a different cost here. We'll say $500. As far as the fees and the inspection and the cleanup, and I use the control key to quickly multiple select those 4 different cells. And I don't want to include those in this report, so I can set their include to no. Now, if you're going into this dialog frequently, you probably want to make sure that every time a report is generated, the first thing that appears is this dialog, and you can do so by checking this option, prompt on report generation. So with that checked, the next time you create a new project or the next time you generate a report, this dialog becomes front and center. So you can make those changes before the report is generated, as opposed to remembering to do it after the report is generated. I'll select OK, and what I've disabled is now gone. You can see from the bottom the report, the cleanup and the inspection are now no longer shown, and towards the top, the fees are no longer included. However, my building permits cost has changed to the $500 that I specified. Back to my floor plan view. So on the left side of the screen, I'll click on the main floor tab. I'll do a zoom extent so we can see more of the drawing. And I'll continue to add details to it. Obviously, let's add a few openings. Draw opening, I'll go to a garage door. I'll pick up a 16-foot garage door, placed at the front. Quickly add a couple of others. A man door, let's go with a country door to the top there. And I'll add a couple of slider windows. Let's go with a 36 by 42. Add one left and right, and pan my drawing. I'll put one at the back as well. Now the garage door has automatically centered itself based on the size of that door and the length of wall it's been placed in. For the other windows, well, to quickly center them, I can right click on them, center their opening, right click, center opening, and do the same for the one at the back. For the door itself, it doesn't need to be centered, but I can edit that dimension, and if I need it to be positioned separately, again, editing the associated dimensions will allow you to position that door. Well, with those openings now in place, obviously I'm getting more information there on the right side for my material report. I'm getting jack studs, opening headers, the openings and doors themselves, windows and doors, are also being accounted for. So the drawing becomes obviously a database of information. The material report is grabbing its information to report directly from the floor plans that are assembled. Now, I'm only going to be creating a single floor plan, but to point out, on the navigation, top of the navigation is the model. Only the drawings that are assembled under the model will be included into the report that's generated. The same with any elevation section or 3D. So if you had two-story home, you have to make sure that if you're going to estimate the drawing, you want to make sure all drawings are assembled. And that means including them under the model. So the drawing becomes obviously a database of information of which the material report pulls information from. So that obviously means that the report is only as accurate as the drawings themselves. So what you're going to want to concentrate on is within the drawing, you want to make sure that all aspects of the drawing are accounted for, or more specifically, all modes of the drawing. So back in my floor plan tab, by default, we're on the drawing mode. But if you're not going to include something in the drawing, then obviously it will not be included in the material report as well. So I'm going to come and next go to floor system mode. I'm going to create a slab on grade here. So I'll come to the draw menu, slab, auto trace, click into the middle of the floor plan. It does add a concrete slab, although by default it's a non-structural. I want this to be a slab on grade or a structural slab. So to make that change, I can edit the middle of the slab, set it from non-structural to a structural slab, and that adds footings around the perimeter. And if you're taking a note of the report, I now have footings or monolithic footings. It's a structural concrete slab, which now includes rebar, and it also includes a wire mesh. So those are two methods of reinforcing the same object, or two methods of reinforcing the slab. We only really need one method, either a wire mesh or the rebar. So I'm going to right click on the rebar, and there's the option to remove that line. Takes it out of the report altogether. It's no longer attributing to its total cost. The rebar for the monolithic footings, the footings themselves, it gives me 176 feet. Okay. The building is, what does it say, 20 by 24, so that's 88 feet total. 176 is twice that, so it's giving me, I believe, 2 rebars along the length of each footing. That's probably not enough for me. I prefer to have 4 rebars running through each edge of my footing. So I'm going to make that change. I can double click on the quantity that the program has estimated. And upon doing so, I'm allowed to edit that value or that quantity. In this case, I want twice as much as what the program calculates. So I'm going to choose multiply quantity by and say 2. And that simply doubles that quantity. Now notice that that field is in a gray highlight. This is because it's now a modified value. If I poise my cursor over it, there'll be a tooltip that indicates what that unmodified value was. It's 176. I'm also going to change the description. I think I need number 5 rebar, 5/8 as opposed to 1/2 inch. And well, 5/8 rebar is a little bit more pricey, so I'm going to have to increase the cost. So here I can double click on the cost value, and here I'll specify it's 55 cents per foot. So these changes I am making currently are going to affect this one project. So if I were to close this report and open it up again, or close the entire project and open it up again, those changes I'm making here are going to be kept. They're going to stick with the project. but these are not the default. So if I generate another project will once again give me both types of reinforcement, the rebar and the wire mesh, and it would again only give me 2 rebar lengths per edge of my footings. So what I prefer to do is not include those as changes to the specific project, but I want those to be the defaults. Before we go and do that, I want to point out a couple of other things here. Towards the top, we have the option to show removed lines. If I select that, it will show the rebar that I removed for the slab itself. It displays it again in a gray bar to understand that it's been modified, but those or that line is in a overstrike mode. Although I can see the cost value and everything, it's not attributing to the overall total cost. If I decide that I perhaps wanted it back into the report, I can right-click on it and there'll be an option to re-add the line. Similarly, if I decided that I did not want to have twice as much rebar than what the program automatically determines, I can right-click on a modified cell and say remove modification. Or if I wanted to do it quickly for all of them, I want to get rid of all the modifications I put in, that's what the button up here does, remove all modifications. So I'm going to do that, takes them all away, puts all of them, the values back to their defaults. Next, I'm going to come up here and we'll change those defaults. To do so, File, and System Options. From here, I'm going to go to SoftList Report Configurations. These are the various report configurations that are available. I've currently modified or been looking at the standard. I'll click it and then hit Configure. What I'm left with next is a list of all the materials that the program has configured for the standard report. Let's first take a closer look at the rebar. So once I find rebar for the slab, I'll edit that. And it brings up this dialog, the material setup. So we can go into a brief discussion here as to how the program estimates material quantities. And it does so by creating what we call material formulas. A formula determines if a material is needed, and if so, how much of that material is required. So a formula sets out a series of conditions that must be met before a material can list. So basically what it does, if an object on the drawing satisfies the conditions laid out by the formula, then a quantity of that material is determined. So a formula basically does two things. First of all, it decides if a material is needed, and if it is, how much is needed. So there's conditions that are set up and a calculation of its quantity. So it's kind of doing two things here. So the first thing is the conditions. When is a material needed? And it does so by organizing all objects drawn first into logical groups. And that's what we see in the heading of this dialog. It's group slab. So slabs, when you draw them in your floor plan, SoftList organizes them into a group called slab, coincidentally. So in order for slab rebar to be counted or estimated, first of all, you need to have a slab on your drawing. The next thing that needs to do, the next condition, as we can see here, only calculate materials if slab. Slabs also need to have a footing. So as long as it's a slab and as long as the slab has footings, then we will calculate a quantity of material for it. And it does so down here in the lower left under calculation of its quantity. When we calculate the quantity, the program then takes a look at known properties of the group chosen. In this case, group slab, there's a series of what we call variables They're variables because they vary depending on how big the object is in the drawing. So it takes the area of the slab, signified by the variable slab underscore area, and well, divides by 4. Then the next thing here is there's a plus sign and does the same math, takes the area divided by 4. If I come over here to notes, several materials do have a note describing what it's doing. In this case, it states that the spacing of the rebar is 4 inches on center in each direction. Okay, so that's why we take the area and divide by 4 and then do it again because it's going in each direction. It's 1/2 inch diameter, or number 4 rebar, and take a look at the note. If we're using wire mesh in the slab, we should disable this material, and that's what we intended to do at the beginning. So I'm going to disable this material. I do not ever use rebar in the slab. I always use wire mesh. So I'm going to take the include and set it to no. That means it will never include rebar for the slab. I'll hit OK and save that change. No longer will rebar in the slab be estimated again, unless I enable that back to yes. Next, we'll take a look at the rebar for the monolithic footing. So click on it and edit material. Once again, come to notes. It says 2 horizontal rebars per footing, and again using 1/2 inch diameter number 4 rebar. Okay, but I've already discussed that I need to have 4 lengths of rebar along the edge. So I'm just going to change how the material is estimated. It's going to take the length. In this case, it's the length of the slab's edge. And we can see again, it's using the same group slab, and again, it has to have a footing. And if that's the case, we'll take the length of that slab, or the length of the slab's edge to be specific, and multiply its length by 4. Gives me 4 lengths of rebar along each edge. The description is right here. It's simply I can type in whatever value I wish to change. I'll say it's number 5. And under the accounting option, this is where we can specify the cost values. In this case, 55 cents per lineal foot of number 5 rebar. So I've made a couple of changes. I've disabled the rebar for the slab, and I've modified how the rebar and the footings for the slab are estimated. I'll save those changes and hit OK for the big button down there. And one more OK for the system options. And there'll be an option to save that change. I'll say yes. Now back in my actual report, it doesn't look like anything has happened. There's no change to how the rebar is being estimated, or the rebar for the slab is still being included. This is because the report's defaults are project specific. I want this project to tie itself directly to the system. For that to occur, I'm going to come up here to File and go to Project Options. From Project Options, again, locate SoftList Report Configurations, and there's an option at the top here called Use System. So I'm going to select that. And what happens now is that now this project is no longer relying on its own series of report configurations. It's going to always tie in to the system report configuration. So I'll hit OK. And now the report regenerates because it now is relying on whatever the system has set up for its defaults. And it has obviously removed my rebar on the slab and modified how the rebar on the footings is estimated. It's number 5, and then I get obviously what looks like to be an adequate amount of the rebar, and the cost has also changed. So it's no longer a modification to the report. It's now a permanent change, and it's going to be applied for this project, and it will now also apply to all projects here afterwards. Back to the floor plan. Again, the report is only as accurate as the drawing itself. So we've been through the floor system mode. I'm going to continue with the other modes. I'm next going to go to the roof. It's the more obvious one. And I'll quickly apply a roof. We'll get an auto roof to put a quick hip on it. I'm going to right click and apply a gable to the front and back edges. So a quick way to apply a gable there. And from the draw menu, I'm going to click on auto stick frame, draw framing, auto stick frame. I want to add rafters to it. Back to the draw menu, back to framing. I'm going to also include a ladder set. Top and bottom, just some lookouts for my raft or my gables. And as I'm adding this information, again, taking a look, it's all being estimated in my report. I now have common rafters. There's also a gable ladder framing, 2x6 for the framing of the gable ladders, and it's 32 feet, as we can see. Well, that's based off of the current default framing spacing, which is 16 inches. Well, the framing ladders, or the gable ladder framing, probably can get away with a 2-foot spacing. So I'm going to right click on my ladder framing set, edit it, and set it up as a 2-foot spacing. Hit OK. I'll quickly get to a repeat edit here and do the bottom. So my ladder framing is a little bit less because it now has a greater spacing. I need less material for it. Also within that framing, taking a look at the common rafter, there's an asterisk beside, and there's several asterisks beside several other materials. What that indicates is that that particular lumber item has been included into a cut list. So right here it says I need 2x6 by 14 foot lengths, and there's 36 of them, but they're not exactly that length. If I come to the report tab and click on show cut list report, it does just that, shows the cut list report to indicate how, in this case, the rafters are to be cut. They're 12 feet, 11 and 3/8. That's how long they are actually required. So we have to order a 14-foot length to satisfy that lumber size. To get back to the standard report, we can just simply deselect the show cut list report, and it brings us back to the generated report. So lumber quantities are always going to be in an orderable size. We'll tell you how many, in this case, for the headers, you need 2x10 by 14s, you need 2x10 by 18s, and how much you need. And then the cut list report will indicate how those are to be cut. Back to my floor plan drawing. So that's the roof information. Let's continue with other modes. Let's maybe go to room mode. Draw, room, 2-car garage, hit OK. Add the car or 2-car garage room. Now what this does is a number of things. It quickly adds interiors, and what we mean by that is it adds a flooring. If, well, a garage itself wouldn't have any, but if it was a bedroom or a kitchen, it would add carpet or hardwood or whatever type of flooring is defined for that room. It can also add, and if I edit that room, maybe give you a better understanding. So it adds a wall covering, paint, wallpaper, whatever is defined for that room. Baseboard as an option. I don't believe a garage has it. It doesn't, so we'll enable it for the garage. Let's say for this example, we can also add chair rail, crown mold, a tray ceiling, flooring, as I was discussing, and a ceiling itself. So all those elements are quickly added by defining a room. I'll hit OK, and you can see from the 3D preview, it does have indeed baseboard now. It also adds some simplistic electrical items. It adds outlets around the room, and as defined by the room, it can also add a ceiling light. I don't believe the garage has that defined, so if we needed to further enhance what the room has automatically added, we can go to the other modes to fine-tune So as I was discussing, if it was the electrical, you needed to add a ceiling light to it. We can switch the drawing to electrical mode. Electrical symbols, ceiling lights. Should be a fluorescent light down here, might be appropriate for that. Garage, so add a fluorescent ceiling light and quickly add it into the room. You can add other options, a switch, which would be under a standard library. Add that to the door. And again, all these pieces are going to be adding to the total cost of your material report. So if I can scroll down the report, eventually we'll come to our electrical options. There they are. And it's adding the electrical options that I've put in and costing them out. Back in the floor plan, so that's the electrical. If we switch it then to ceiling, again, it's added the ceiling through the mode. We might need to add ceiling insulation. That's not going to automatically add, but we can do it here because, again, if we miss it, it's not going to be included in the report. I'll do an auto trace, click, and at the top of the report that's currently shown, we now have ceiling insulation in addition to the wall insulation. All that's being estimated as I'm placing these items into the drawing. I'm going to come back to default room mode. And while that's up, I'm going to scroll my report to the top and taking a look at the framing. It's got wall plate, but no pressure treated plate. Anytime we have a wall that's on a concrete slab, it probably should be a pressure treated bottom plate. Now, a quick way to actually make that occur, we can go in and edit any wall that's drawn from the edit dialog, going to the selections tab. If it is indeed a framed wall, we can automatically set that to be a pressure treated bottom plate without having to actually go and define that within the wall's definition. It's a quick way to take any wall and say it has a pressure treated bottom plate. And as you can see, once I have done that, I'm now getting a listing of pressure treated wall plate versus normal wall plate. Once again, I'll go to a repeat edit and get the remaining 3 walls. So all walls are now a pressure treated bottom plate, and my quantity reflects that. Let's bring up a 3D tab again. I'm going to add a little bit of information to the openings. First and foremost, there is a sill that gets added. A sill gets added to any wall that has a brick, or a brick in its definition. In this case, my brick is below the window itself, so I technically don't need this sill. So if I don't want to estimate it, I need to edit those windows and remove it. So I'll do so, edit that window, go to the display tab and remove the sill. I'll do a repeat edit to get rid of the remaining. I don't think I need one here for the garage man door as well. I'll spin around and get the remaining. The garage door by default never gets a sill, so we don't have to worry about that. Next, I'm going to edit the openings and apply an exterior trim. And once again, go to repeat edit and apply that same exterior trim to all openings. Now, all this information, again, as you would expect, added to the material report. So there's my exterior door and window trim. Just a little, I guess, some small details. With that trim applied, the water table, the brick ledge, if you will, is a little bit high. Well, we can modify that, and that will adjust the brick quantity and the siding quantity slightly. So I'm going to edit the walls. And this wall has a transition option, which allows me to indicate where that change of material occurs. Currently at 3 feet, I'll say that's 2'10". I'll repeat edit to do the remaining walls. ties that up. Let's now concentrate on the quantities that are being shown. So what I've got here is a listing of how much window and door trim I need. It's 50 feet and 46 feet respectively. Well, that's not how it gets ordered. I order it in, let's say, 10-foot lengths. So I got to modify how that's going to be estimated. And that's our little next example. To do that, if I make the SoftList tab active, across the top we have the option to clicking on the Materials button. Previously, I went into File, System Options, found the SoftList report and Configure to get to the same dialog. A quick way to access it is to use that Materials button I just pressed. Way down here at about 279, we see the window and door trim. If I edit first the exterior door trim, belongs to its own group, group opening. There's various components, the trim itself, keystones, corner blocks, depending on what it is you're estimating. In this case, it's the trim. The trim needs to be included on a wall that has shake, siding, or a stucco, and it only, for the door at least, only going to go on opening types that are of a door. So what we want to do is not change how it's, or the we're not changing how it's determining to be estimated, not the, we want to say it's going to be each. So we're going to specify, as I said, 10-foot pieces, I think I said. So we change the units to each, and we say, well, one piece, or each, covers 10 feet, 10 lineal feet. Under Calculate Dimension, there's also a description here, and we also want to say that we want that description to be included in the report as well. It's a good idea to describe how big a piece is. We then come to accounting and reflect the cost for one piece. Same with the labor cost to install it. I'm going to make a similar change to the exterior window trim. Units are going to be each, and you'll notice that change in the units does not magically change how it's estimated. That is something we have to take care of. And basically, if you're changing the units, you're just adding a coverage for most things. We're just changing the coverage for how it's being estimated. In this case, one piece covers 10, and I'm going to describe it as 10 feet and change the cost accordingly. And the labor. I'll save all my changes, go back to the generated report, and it will update the report to reflect those changes. So now I get 5 boards each of 10-foot length for both window and door trim. Let's take a look at brick next. Currently, brick is listing in square feet, so how many square feet of brick. I'm going to change that to say how many individual bricks I need instead. So to do that, once again, we come to materials, brings up the list of all the materials. There's an option to quickly find a material. I've been currently scrolling because I kind of recall where these things are, but if you're not sure where something is, just go ahead and type in what you're looking for, in this case, brick, and it will indicate where that is. In this case, line 270. And notice that there are, well, in this case, 4 different brick materials. It's 2 that we're concentrating on, one for the gables and one for the walls. And if you notice their calculation method, they're both set to accumulate. Let's go and explain quickly or briefly why that is. First of all, we'll edit bricks on the gable. And what this does is that it takes a look at group roof. Well, that's odd. Well, what it's doing actually is it takes a look at if the roof is a gable end. And if it is a gable end, and you've specified the gable end to fill in itself with brick, well, then there's a quantity of brick in the roof itself. Once it determines that quantity, it's adding it through an accumulation here. It adds it to the material of simply brick. We're going to add the coverage here. As I said, one square foot is going to be accounted for by 6 bricks. So 1 brick then covers 0.1666 square feet. So that's how much square footage 1 brick covers. So again, when we're changing units, we simply say how much does 1 unit cover. The base unit of SoftList, all values are determined in feet or square feet or cubic feet, depending on if it's a volume, area, or just a length. So the area here is determined in square feet. So we say 1 brick covers 0.166 square feet. Gives us 6 bricks per square foot. Hit OK and save those changes, and I'll edit brick on the walls and do the same thing. It belongs to its own group wall. So here it's looking for walls that contain brick, and if it finds any, it does some math to determine what it needs as a quantity. In this case, area of all walls minus the openings on the wall. That's what that special variable does. Wall area no open. It simply is the area of the wall minus the area of all the openings. There's also a little bit that takes away from the roof if there's a roof overhang. But we want the same coverage. 1 brick covers 0.1666 square feet. Now there is no accounting in either the brick gables or in the one we have in front of us, brick walls, because the information, cost values, etc., is determined by the material that these two are accumulating into, which is the brick. So if I then edit the brick material, it in itself attributes no extra quantities. That's why the calculation of its quantity is currently at 0. Instead, it's waiting for quantities of brick on the gable and or quantities of brick on the walls to be added to this material. The only thing we need to do here is specify the appropriate units each, and under accounting, specify how much that cost. I forgot the decimal. So 92 cents per brick. I think labor works out to be about $1.14 per brick. Save my changes. The report is then regenerated, and I now have a quantity of individual bricks as opposed to a square footage. Next, the roof is currently being vented through an attic vent. As we see here, there's 3 of them, but that's not how I wish to provide the venting system for this roof. I rather have a ridge vent. So kind of like what we had earlier with the 2 methods of reinforcing your slab. You either had rebar or you had wire mesh. Well, unfortunately, in this case, there is no default material for ridge vent. The program only accounts for attic vents. So now we need to create a new material to estimate ridge vents rather than attic vents. To do so, once again, going up to materials, I'll currently search for the current attic vent. There it is. And I want to set its include to no. I do not want to list attic vents. Now I can do so by editing the material, or I can set the include field here directly to no. So that removes attic vents from listing. However, I need to invent a new material. So we can also add new materials, obviously. So we're going to hit the insert button, which allows me to create a brand new material from scratch. When we start adding a new material, we're first prompted with this dialog asking us to choose the group of which this new material will be based off of. In this case, ridge vents belong on the roof, so therefore we have to draw a roof to include it, therefore its group is roof. hit OK, and the material setup is opened. We name the material, include, yes, units, we'll just keep it as feet. We'll get our lineal length, and then we give all the information that's required. So the next thing is we have to set up further conditions. Under roof component, ridge vents belong on the ridge of the roof. That is the component we need to check. Under roof materials, ridge vents only applied if it was an asphalt shingle roof. If it's cedar shingles or standing seam metal or any other roof type, we do not want it. So the further condition will be it must be asphalt shingles. We then go ahead and determine its quantity down here. Now we determine the quantity again by variables, known properties of the group chosen. And we can get a list of those known properties or variables by hitting the button at the end of the field, brings up an add to formula dialog with all the known variables specific to group roof, or in this case, component ridge. And the variable that indicates the length of the ridge is ridge underscore length. So once found, I can hit add to formula, puts it in there, and all I need to do is go to accounting and indicate how much it costs per foot. I'll say $2 per foot. And to install it, I don't know, 50 cents to install it per foot. Hit OK, hit OK again, save my changes, and hit OK once again on the big dialog. And the report generates again. I no longer have attic vents, but I do not have my ridge vent yet. There's one more thing that we have to take a look at. And if we look at the output options at the bottom, the reason why is because it's not included in what we label as the layout. So let's now take a look at that. If we double click on that error, it brings up the part of the program that allows us to overcome that problem, and that is, in this case, the layout. So what we see here on the right side is all the materials that are currently configured in the standard report. If a material is added to the layout, it's signified by graying its name out. If it's not in the layout, it will be a bold text, such as ridge vent. So to include it in the layout, locate in the report the spot you want to include it into. In this case, I'm going to locate the original attic vent. Although I've excluded it, so it will never count, if it were to be enabled again, it would go into this location. And I want the ridge vent to fall into the same location. I can do so by dragging and dropping its name into that part of the layout. I'll hit OK. Now that I have ridge vents included in the layout, no longer do I get the error in the output at the bottom. And if I scroll down a little bit, we'll eventually come to, oh, there it is, the ridge vents that I've estimated. Okay, so that should wrap things up. I hope this session has proved useful for you and kind of gave you a basic understanding of the SoftList module. Briefly, the SoftList uses groups to organize all your objects that you draw on your floor plan, and those groups help to determine the material that is to be estimated through the use of material formulas. And we can change existing material formulas by modifying typically their units, which specifies you entering in an appropriate coverage. Or if necessary, you can create new materials, again, by going through the basic checks, you're making sure what group the object that you're attempting to estimate belongs to, filling out any other conditions that may prevent it from reporting, and then filling out the appropriate calculation of its quantity. Now, the report configuration holds all those materials, but it's the layout that controls the organization of those materials. So once you've created a new material itself, it needs to be included into the layout to know where in the generated report it's to list. If you wish to review anything that I've discussed today, we will be posting a video of this session on our website and on our YouTube channel soon. So I do thank you for joining me today, and you all have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.